Hey, everybody. Welcome to the BA Zone's pre-show. Tonight's going to be a great night. We're going to be talking about consistency. We're actually dealing with consistency for the rest of the month. So we'll get into that in a few minutes. So if you know anybody who might be interested in that topic, please feel free to pass us along. Get everybody going, and don't forget to, if you have any questions or comments during the show, to jump out. We love to hear from you. Let's see what's been going on this past week. Actually, last week Kathleen did the show. She's behind the scenes tonight because I was traveling for business, and I went to Portland, Oregon. Actually, you can't say Oregon, it's Oregon. Oregon, that's the way they pronounce it out there, sort of like a kidney, like an organ. At least I think that's the way they were pronouncing it. But it was interesting. If you've never traveled in your job, it's always fun because you always tend to travel at night. And I went out at about 7:30 in the evening, East Coast time. And of course, there was a delay with the plane. And delays are delays, you know, but this kind of delay was like the pilot came right on and told us what it was. Which I like because it's like you really want to know why you're not lifting off. And this happened to be the starter on the engine cowl, I think it was called. So, you know, right away, everybody's like Googling, what is that? Well, what that is if the engine stops in the middle of the flight, that little starter turns it back on, and that wasn't working. So, you know, you start to put your head between your legs and kiss your butt goodbye kind of thing. So it was a 2-hour delay. It was fine and everything. And you know, my father always used to say, look, the pilot's not going to fly if the plane is really screwed up, which is true. So we took off, no problem. And Portland is really, if you ever get a chance to go there, it's a really interesting place. When you get off the plane, first of all, I mean, the airport's smaller, obviously, than the ones out here. But the immediate thing I noticed coming from the East Coast was how clean the air smelled. I mean, literally, it was like a fresh scent. It was like so nice. And we really had a good time out there. We met with a nice group of people that we're working with, really great, talented group. And we went around to Portland, and they really have like a ton of little tiny microbreweries. And they all have really good food too. You know, a lot of them, sometimes the ones over here, you can't have food with a microbrewery. You know, they try to restrict everything. But out there, it really was a nice time. And then, of course, we came back taking the red eye and, you know, got in at 5 in the morning. So it's like basically 2 or 3 days without sleeping. We're getting very minimal sleep. So, but I'm back. Kathleen is behind the scenes, and we're going to get going here in just 1 minute. And again, tonight we're going to be talking about consistency. So, consistency goes across all types of areas. And tonight we're going to be talking about consistencies, maintaining consistency in the front end. So, tag a friend and send us hearts and loves if you're enjoying the show. And okay, it is 8 o'clock, and welcome to the BA Zone's live show. Tonight, as I was just saying, we're going to be talking about consistency. And so please feel free to comment. And before we get going, we're going to turn it over to Kathleen to do our fantastic little intro. So Kathleen, please take it away. Just makes me kind of want to dance to that, doesn't it? So everybody, thank you. Welcome everybody to all YouTube, Facebook, and Periscope fans out there. And we're going to get going with the show tonight. And don't forget to please, if you want to comment or ask any questions during the show, please feel free to. We'd love to hear from you. I mean, we do this for you. So consistency. Consistency is a good thing. And what do we mean when we're talking about consistency? I'll give you a good example. Have you ever gone to a restaurant and the food was outstanding and the service was fantastic and the atmosphere was wonderful? It was a quiet little out of the way place. And you can't wait to go home and tell all your friends that you had such a great time there. And, you know, you actually invite them out to go back with you. And, you know, a week later, maybe you do go back. And and the experience isn't quite the same. You're expecting a certain experience, and it's not quite the same. So what happens? The food tastes lousy. The staff keeps disappearing when you need them. And the quiet little out of the way place is undergoing partial renovations, and you can't even hear yourself chew over the hammering, right? So this is what kind of happens. And this is like this. Do you go back after that? Maybe, but not likely. You're probably not going to do that. You had a bad experience, and it was because it was an inconsistent expectation. It's not what you expected at all. And, this happens in software all the time, right? So when we're talking about software applications and consistency, we mean that we need to meet the user's expectations by following a certain set of rules and standard that make it easier for those users to navigate through your application, to quickly complete a task or get the information that they need, in a manner that they're used to seeing. So it's all about that user experience, and more specifically, the common user experience. So what do we mean by that? Our brains, and Kathleen will tell you this all the time because she's a very big fan of patterns, as I am, and she uses them differently than I do. But our brains are hardwired to recognize patterns and follow patterns. And when we see a pattern a few times, we come to expect that in a similar application, you'll see the same type of pattern. The patterns enable us not to have to relearn everything all the time. It saves us time. And so, for example, if we want to exit out of a pop-up message or a pop-up page, most of us know that there's going to be some type of little exit icon, usually a little X, that's in the upper right-hand corner of the page. And you kind of expect to see that. If you see a radio button, you know that you can only make one selection. You're not going to be able to make multiple selections like you would in checkboxes. And if we commonly use a certain function or a field in a certain way, we expect it to be labeled the same way throughout the application, or maybe across different platforms that use that same type of field and text. So consistency is about meeting the user's expectations. So things like use and placement of visual elements on the page, right? Consistent copy, whether it be labels or language or the style to the exact type of task that you're doing, the terminology, content that comes up in validation messages or error messages should be consistent, or alerts, text that provides direction to a user, or fields or forms, that type of consistent copy. You try to keep, well, you should absolutely keep branding consistent. So if you have logos or images or, fonts or colors, for that consistent look and feel throughout the application. Are the backgrounds consistently the same, or the same shade? Are they white? Are they gray? Or are they changing so much that they should come with a seizure warning? That because they're all not the same. It's just it's that disconcerting type of experience. Are there common defaults? Like, does the calendar default to today's date, if it should? Or does it show the last 30 days, et cetera? So are things ordered or displayed with the most important content or steps being first in the order? And is that consistent all the way through? Common functionality or components like buttons, text fields, lists, forms, templates, messages, progress bars or icons, which is my little pet peeve, because I can't tell you how many times I've gone into an application and hit save, and you have no idea if the machine is thinking. There's no little, progress bar or progress icon. And I see that consistently, and that kind of thing drives you crazy because you really don't know. Should I hit that save again, and then go into some kind of crazy loop? So that type of consistency. And also there's the consistency of understanding what the primary goal of the user is. If are they assessing pain levels for a patient? Are they looking for a restaurant? Are they trying to make airline reservations that I was talking about in the pre-show? I flew to Portland. So, you want consistent patterns across certain types of goals. What are they trying to do? And is that consistent with the norm that's sort of out there? So these design principles, what we call them, should be consistent throughout the site, especially if you have multiple applications or cross-platform applications or a suite of products. Especially in a suite of products, they have to have that consistent look and feel on the front end. And if you don't meet those user expectations, they're not going to use the products. They won't return to the restaurant. And if they have to, they're not going to like it. They're not going to be happy at all. So you want them to move seamlessly through your product, your application. And it's sort of like, you're driving a car and sometimes you get to work and you don't even know how you got there. That's the kind of consistency that you want, so that when there are key business decisions to be made, they can focus on them and not, where's the save button now? Is it over to the left? Is it over to the right? Down to the bottom? Or that's sort of the things that cause really a tremendous amount of stress and a tremendous amount of frustration. So let's just take just keeping all that in mind. If you have any questions, please feel free to jump in. I'm just going to double check and make sure that Kathleen hasn't said anything. So we're good for right now. So let's talk about some examples. And please, if you have any examples of this, how things can go wrong when you don't use a sort of standard structure around design elements, please send them in because they are quite entertaining. So what can go wrong when you don't have standards to follow? Some examples are, you could have a new developer who comes on board and he's been assigned, you've given him a requirement to develop a particular feature. That feature could look nothing like the existing features in the application. Now, they will try. Developers may go out, if they have access to it, and look at the rest of the app and try. But if they're used to doing something a certain way, it could look different. I've seen where a label on a field has been labeled 3 different ways and more across multiple pages within the same application. So, they're just labeling it, a certain way. I've seen pop-ups where the delete and the save button, there's a delete and save button right next to each other, or a cancel and a save button. On one page was the delete was on I think on the left, and the save was on the right. And on the second pop-up, they were reversed. So what happened? People got used to hitting that save button on the right. Pop-up comes up, they hit the delete, and they lose all their information on the left. These are some of the things, if you don't have it laid out that that's the way it should look, that's going to happen. So things like that, where data is lost or where you can't find an element because it's moving from page to page, depending on the developer. It's sort of like Where's Waldo navigation. Remember Where's Waldo? The little hat. You had to find him and all of the other objects that were in the books. It's a great game for kids, right? Plenty of those books. Find Waldo. Where's Waldo? Find Waldo. This is like Where's Waldo navigation. The save button's on the right. It's on the right. It's on the next screen. It's on the left. It's all over the place. So that kind of where there's nothing cohesive or there's nothing consistent, it could be the font style. The font style is different, or the size is different because they don't have those exact dimensions. These little things that normally you would think people don't pick up on, subconsciously they do, and it disturbs them. It really does affect users. So having that standard right in front of that will help prevent that. Not saying that'll prevent it completely, but it will definitely take that down a notch. If you have an offsite development team and you don't have, a a structured way for these developers to develop, you're going to get things, and I've seen this before. We had many years ago, we had an offsite team, and I believe I think they were European, and we in the United States do for a day, day, month, year. But in Europe, it's month, day, year. And birth dates, date of birth, everything was off until we figured out what that was. There was no mask to label it. So it was like we couldn't figure out, initially what was going on. So you have those type of things too. You want to put that standard in. This is the way the date should display. This is what the calendar should look like. This is what a date picker should look like. And that really helps with the consistency in the development area. You could also, and we've had this before too, 2 teams of developers or 3 or more that are siloed in different, parts of the company. They are working on different applications that are sort of supposed to be cohesive. So for example, if you were doing a clinical app, you might have a group working on disease management. You might have a group working on maternity. You may have another group working on oncology. And so they're all working within their own, sort of disease or condition areas. And they don't have any type of pattern to follow. So they're all doing it in a different way. And you want, for an outside consumer to use this, potentially a healthcare company, the layouts may look completely different. It's supposed to be a suite of products, and it should look a lot alike and navigate a lot from the front end, but they look different. The main menu is on the left nav in one app, and the main menu is across the top in another app. Information icons are used in one. To get information in another, you may hover over a data element. There may be too many validation messages or no validation messages. Data fields captured, like, for example, on the clinical, a diagnosis, on one side, they may only be capturing the first 3 numeric numbers of a diagnosis code. And in the other app, they're drilling down to, 5 with a decimal and 2 decimal points after that. So it makes reporting a nightmare because there's a lack of consistency across that. Even from things that are just like annoying, like drugs in one app may be in all caps, in another app it might be the first letters capitalized, and then you have the lowercase for the rest of it. Last name, first name versus first name, last name. It's simple things that you would think wouldn't cause that much of a problem, but they actually really do. So those are some of the types of problems. And, if you have any other inconsistencies, please feel free to jump right in that you've run across. Like I said, they are entertaining, and they're pretty much a learning experience as well. Just so that we'll just take a little break here, let you know where you can find us if you're looking for us. You can always find us on the bazone.com. That's our website. We're also on YouTube, Instagram, Periscope, Twitter. Did I say Facebook? Yeah, I believe Facebook. Oh, there, she's got them up there, right there. So if you ever need to drop us a line or you want to get in touch with us, please feel free to do that. And we'd love to hear from you. And the crowd is very quiet tonight. I don't know. Is it my pink shirt? Is it too loud? Is this so loud it's making you be silent? Please don't let it be. Please feel free to please jump right in and chat a bit. So, okay. So let's see. What can we do? What can we do for consistency? Let's talk about some tips and some tools that we can use as business analysts. And some of these cross over. Some of them are tools that might be used by web designers. But a lot of times, some of these things we can use as business analysts as well, because we're doing wireframes and comps a lot. I know I am. Not at the level that Kathleen, who's a web designer, she does a fantastic job, but not at that level, but we are using them. So some of the things we can do. How about the good old-fashioned glossary? Okay, the glossary is going to get everybody speaking the same language. They're going to understand what certain terms, certain phrases mean, and they won't misuse that type of word or that type of language. I'm working on a project right now that there's a difference between, and this is all around pharmaceuticals, an MDQ, a UOI, a UOM, a UOM per UOI. So you can see where this could become, from a labeling perspective, even very confusing. And there's calculations for each. So, a glossary would help at the highest level get everybody speaking in the same type of terms. And that's always a given. We usually put a glossary in all of our requirements documents. Also a data dictionary. Now, a data dictionary will help not only with making sure the field sizes are the correct size. They also give a description, whether it's the element is a read, write, or update, or you could delete it. Whether it's a checkbox, a radio button, a text field, a free text field, a static element. But it also gives you the benefit of putting the front end label. So they're usually in a spreadsheet, and it gives you all those components. But the most important one is the description and the labels from the front end, because you want to keep those labels consistent from page to page to page. And every page, you'll list out all the fields with their labels and all their elements. Data dictionary will keep all of that on track. Of course, you must maintain it and keep it up to date. And that's the same with all of these tools that we're going to be using. They're living documents. They're not, like I said, a one and done. They're never a one and done. Another tool is style guides. Now, style guides are typically kept by a web designer. I know Kathleen keeps style guides. They focus on design elements such as the color and the logos, the branding. There's also, you could have a branding document, but they focus on the fonts and the icons and page or screen layouts, justification, the correct usage for the standard functional controls, such as the buttons, the drop-down selections or drop-down lists, radio buttons, check boxes, and spacing, anything like that that shows you the layout from a visual perspective and what controls and what not to use. It helps keep the entire development team on the same page. So it makes the onboarding of those new developers much easier. Groups of developers, it'll keep them consistent, as well as quality assurance, when they're doing testing. If they have this in front of them, they can do that. Now, typically QA is really going to manage the beginning to end type of task flow, the workflow. But if they have a style guide, they can also go through that. And as business analysts, if we have a style guide, we can help with that testing to make sure that those style guides are maintained. And if you're developing across multiple platforms for the product, such as web, mobile apps, the iPhone that I have, the Android that Kathleen has, you want to keep that branding and product consistent. Now, they are going to be a little different in each one of those delivery systems, but you have to have it documented so that there is some branding and consistency that flows through all of them. Take a little sipperoo here. And again, style guides are great to have. Pattern libraries is another one. It's sort of like style guides on crack. It's a bad analogy, but they take the style guides up one step further, and they'll also have the imaging and how you should use it and the description of that. But a lot of them have pre-built components that are written in code already, in HTML or CSS or some other language, so that developers don't have to reinvent the wheel. The code is right there in a lot of them in the pattern libraries. So Again, they contain the visual component, the reason or the rationale for that particular design, and the actual code. And it's all in one place. And developers can go in there and sort of look at that with sort of minimal manipulation. And there's some examples out there of pattern library. I think MailChimp uses it. Google's material design is a really good one, and I think Salesforce. There's a few other ones that already have pattern. They use pattern libraries already, and it's really, really helpful to just be able to, focus on other things and not those common out things. You can just grab them and use them. You can also use cross-functional or cross-team testing. Because we tend to see things in patterns, different groups may see patterns differently, and they'll pick up inconsistencies that other groups might not. So if you have a user group, you can have a particular department look at it and have a different department also look at that. Even though they may not use that functionality at all, they may just pick up the inconsistencies in the patterns, as well. So we do a lot of that. We do a lot of cross-functional team testing just to make sure we've gotten all the bugs out, make sure there's no inconsistencies, or at least to minimize them. So again, these are some of the tools. There are more. These are just some that we're going over this evening. And again, they're not a one and done. These are all living documents that will need to be kept up to date. So, I mean, how do you guys stay consistent? Are there some tools or tips that particularly you use to make sure that the documentation that you're putting out there has the elements that are consistent? Do you have style guides? Do you use style guides? I'd be interested to know about that. So while you're thinking about that, we'll just take a little break and just let you know. I don't want to last week we cut somebody off, so I have to talk a little slower because sometimes the questions come in sort of towards the end of the show. And last week it was like, oops, we jumped off too quickly. So I'm just going to slow down for a second and let you know that please join our mailing list. You can go to thebazone.com and sign up for the mailing list. We ask for minimal information. We don't use it in any other way other than to keep you informed as to, upcoming shows or classes that we might be offering. We have 2 classes out there right now around getting a job and resumes, getting a business analyst job. And also, if you have any suggestions for future classes, we get a lot of our ideas from you, the audience. What is it that you're interested in? What is it you would like more information on? And we'll try to schedule and post it into a class. And that way we're giving you what you need. And that's what we're here for, to help you out in any way we can. So let's just do a little wrap up and summary. So consistency will help you build confidence with your users. And it gives them a better user experience. And that's what we're trying to do. And when they know what to expect, they're going to have a better user experience. They're going to be able to navigate more quickly, get the information that they need and the tasks done that they want to. You want them coming back to your product, right? Now, you can introduce surprises, but you have to do it the right way, and you have to do it in measured increments. You don't all of a sudden change the entire navigation away from the norm because that doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So creating all of the tool tips, the style guides or the pattern libraries, the data dictionaries, the glossaries, they do take some time, but in the long run, they will save you time because you don't have to continually start from scratch, right? So as I was saying, as a BA, I create wireframes and comps all the time. So I maintain a MIDI pattern library. Now, it doesn't have code. I call it a pattern library, but really it's just this is what the date picker looks like, and this is what the drop downs look like, the radio buttons, and all of that. And I keep them, and I do this in Visio, so I keep them and I just grab them and I can use them consistently. And we'll have a layout. We'll have the layout of how, the search is always up in the upper right and the logo is always in the upper left. And depending on where your navigation is, if it's always over here, make sure you have a column for your nav. And you always have those things sort of pre-built for your wireframes or your comps, because it will save you time. Yes, it takes a little time to initially set them up. Periodically, you have to review them. If you make any changes, you have to go back. But it does save you a tremendous amount of time when you have to, and you want to give people visuals. You want to give users visuals in your requirements to say, this is what it will look like. Visuals work much better for users. So create your own little mini functional library or pattern library for your own comps. You don't have to be a web designer, but if you know one, it's a great thing. So all of those things help reduce miscommunications with the users, the developers, and quality assurance, or the testing folks. So, and it doesn't, some people think that if we put all of these things in style guides, it's sort of restricting, developers especially feel this way, that it might be restricting their creativity or their ability to be innovative. And it actually is quite the opposite. Things that aren't going to change, and things change very slowly. We went from a typewriter to a laptop, and it took a manual typewriter, and it took many, many years. So things occur slowly. Those type of changes where users see, we've been on the internet for quite a while now, and people expect certain patterns. You don't need, as a developer, to reinvent those. If they're a standard item, just plug and play so that you have more time to focus on the next generation of your product, the cool stuff, right? And as again, that'll happen incrementally. If you're constantly reinventing the wheel, you're never going to redesign the car, So anything that's sort of like, okay, that's good. That's good for a long time. Let's focus on the cool stuff. We can just pull this other stuff in. So that's really, the answer to, if I do all this and I'm restricted to style guides, I'm not going to be able to be innovative. No, it's not true. It's not true at all. So there's your argument for style guides to developers or QA. So it is 8:29. I'm just going to take a breather just to check to see if there's anybody out there. Hello, hello, hello. Echo. I don't want to yodel. I'm not in a yodeling mood. I know it's my shirt. My shirt is much too bright. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this evening's show. It looks like we don't have any questions this evening. I know we get a lot of questions on the replay, and that's great. That's fine. So I just want to thank everybody for, for sending the likes and the hearts. Again, we do this for you, and we really do appreciate your feedback. And if you have any suggestions for future shows, please let us know. And other than that, I hope you have a fantastic night, and I hope you enjoyed the show. And we'll see you next week, same time, same place. Okay, everyone, have a fantastic week. Take care. Thanks for dropping by. Good night.